What is up, and welcome back to another episode of the Wizards podcast. I'm your host, Greg Finberg. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about a big trade rumor that has kind of shaken up the last couple hours of free agency and what's been a pretty dead period. Anthony Slater of The Athletic reported that the Wizards are apparently one of the teams in the mix for 22-year-old forward Jonathan Kuminga. I'm going to break it down. Obviously, not an expected addition to the pool. Obviously, teams like the Bulls and the Nets and some others like the Kings in recent days had kind of emerged as some teams interested in Kaminga. And Anthony's report late on Thursday night into Friday night was kind of the first mention that we had heard of the Wizards. And obviously nothing has come from it just yet by the time I'm recording this, but I thought it would be an interesting slash fun pod to kind of break down what the framework of a potential Jonathan Kuminga trade could look like should the Wizards, bite the bullet and make a pretty bold move to bring Kuminga over to Washington. Now I believe that Kuminga is a restricted free agent. Um, However, the Golden State Warriors have been, in ongoing discussions with the 22-year-old forward. Still has a lot of potential, right? But it's been reported that Kaminga's, wants a deal that's upwards of $30 million per season, which sounds pretty rich. I mean, if you look at his stats for the 24-25 season, 15 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, 45% from the field, 30% from three, 67% from the line. Nothing that's like eye popping, but again, in the minutes he played and the role he had on Golden State, those are pretty solid numbers. Now, I don't know if they are $30 million per season numbers. I would say no. But the 30 million would probably be based on, maybe the potential that a guy like Kaminga has, in a system like Washington where he would have more minutes to kind of, blossom. He's a guy that can get downhill and attack the rim. He's a guy that didn't shoot the three ball well, but had spurts at times where he was able to make defenses pay when they left him open from the 3-point line, but more of a downhill player that uses his athleticism to get to the rim and finish around the rim. Uses his speed to use that quick first step to get by defenders and get that edge to get to the rim. So certainly an intriguing prospect, top 10 pick just a couple years ago. Still only 22 years old, played very well in the playoffs, especially in that Minnesota series. Over the last 3 games of that series, averaged 26 points per game, had a game on the road, or I believe it was one of the home games they lost, but he had 30 points. Really stepped up when Steph was out. So certainly a player that has game, certainly a player with high upside, still at just 22 years old. So it would, be dependent on, does Washington buy into that and buy into it enough to work with Golden State on sign and trade to where they're paying Kuminga, 25, $30 million per season. That's obviously a big risk, but they've opened up that cap space with trading Jordan Poole. So maybe, Washington can, look at like a three-year, $90 million deal. Maybe they do 4 years, 120, but that seems pretty rich for a guy like Kuminga. Um, and I should get into the reporting first. This is from Anthony Slater of The Athletic. Um, he put in a story, quote, "The Washington Wizards enter the mix in the last 24 hours, and the idea of Kuminga as a possible fit in Washington's rebuild has gained real momentum, according to league sources," end quote. Um, so pretty significant development there. Anthony's basically reporting that, over the last 24 hours, the Wizards have, I'm sure, discussed some framework of a trade with Kuminga, maybe just gauged the interest of the Warriors and kind of saw what the asking price would be in a potential Kuminga trade. Anthony also has reported previously, in regards, I guess, to the Kings. The Kings offered some package, around. I believe it was Devin Carter and a first round pick, something of that nature, and it was shut down by Golden State. It's been reported by Anthony that the Warriors want, a future first round pick plus a young, promising talent, a young player. The Wizards certainly have a plethora of picks. They have their own, the top 8 protected next year. Can't trade certain ones, but they have pretty much all of their own. They have a lot of swaps, and they also have 3 future first round picks via other teams. They have the 2026 first round pick they got on the Reggie Jackson trade last year, which I believe is the worst of OKC, Houston, and the Clippers. So it's going to be a late first next year. So they have that they could trade. They also have a 2029 Portland first round pick from the Denny Avdia trade. Um, and then they also have a 2030 top 20 protected Golden State pick, which you should definitely keep in mind, because that's definitely an asset they can dangle as a future piece to the Warriors, saying, "Hey, we can give you this pick back." The Wizards got it from the Chris Paul trade, taking back Jordan Poole in that contract. So it's possible that the Wizards say, "Hey, here's this piece. You can get your rights to that pick back, and that way Golden State has some more assets they can trade if they're looking to make even more moves around the deadline to kind of try to make the most of these final years with Steph and Draymond and Jimmy Butler." So certainly intriguing. Um, with the assets the Wizards have, certainly I think can outbid a team like Sacramento, can outbid a team like Chicago. The Nets have a lot to offer, a lot of assets, a lot of young players, but I still like the Wizards' odds there. Um, it seems like the Warriors are kind of at a crossroads. Like I don't know if they can really bring Kuminga back. So there's certainly some juice to these rumors, certainly some intrigue to them. So I wanted to record probably a a quicker pod, but just kind of address it. And I have three different trades that I quickly went into Fanspo, and quickly cooked up some trade ideas. And forgive me if the volume's not great. It's currently 1 a.m. here. I'm trying not to wake my parents up by recording this pod. So apologies if it's a little silent. Hopefully the mic picks up some of the volume and audio. Um, but I'm going to put on the screen a couple of trades here, and just to go over some of the assets the Wizards have. I mentioned the future first, the three additional ones that they have from other teams, including that Golden State pick in 2030 that I think could be a huge trade chip here. But if you are just looking at, assets in regards to players, they have Marcus Smart, expiring $21.5 million contract. Corey Kispert starts a 4-year deal that's getting paying him around 13 million per season. Pretty good contract. Not coming off a great year, but again, shooters in Golden State seem to have career seasons, so that could be a piece that they like to add more spacing. I don't know if Kelly Olynyk will be trade eligible. Yeah, I think it might be 2 months until they can trade him, but that trade also hasn't become official yet. So maybe they decide to work it in as a 3-team trade in some way with the McCollum Poole Pelicans trade. That's maybe another piece they have. And they have a bunch of young talent. Clearly it's been reported that the Warriors want some young pieces back in the trade. The Wizards have a bunch of young pieces. Dylan Jones, AJ Johnson. Um, they just got Dylan Jones. Maybe they reroute him. AJ Johnson's another piece that they can move. I doubt they move, Keyshawn, Bub, Sar, Bilal. Like that wouldn't make sense. Maybe, Tristan Vukcevic resigns and they send him. I'm not sure, but they definitely have the assets. So I'm going to break down three different trade ideas that I could see happening. And again, this is not a foregone conclusion. Like it has literally not even been 2 hours by the time I'm recording this that these reports have been out that the Wizards have been, a possible suitor for Kuminga. But again, this is a fun pod. It's a fun episode. So I'm going to go and break down these three deals right now. If you're watching on YouTube, which if you're not, and you want to see the visuals, come over here, hit the subscribe button while you're at it. We're coming up on 400 subscribers, so appreciate the support. But I'm going to share my screen on YouTube, so YouTube will be able to see it. But if you're just one of the viewers that is just listening, I'll be able to articulate and explain it enough so that you understand the full framework of the trade. So I'm going to go here and share my screen, and this is how it should look. The first move. And I should note the contract for Kuminga varies on a few of these deals. Actually, that's not the trade that I wanted first. I'm going to go to this one first. The contract varies. So I would assume for most of these, like the Marcus Smart I have on the screen right now, that the Wizards would sign Kuminga to a deal around 3 years, 90 million, or maybe 4 years, 120 million. But just considering maybe they decide to give him the 30 million per year that he so covets, and they can structure it differently. And I'll explain in each trade, but that's the general framework of a contract, obviously, to make certain deals work. So the first one I have up on the screen here is Jonathan Kuminga to the Wizards on I believe it's a 4-year deal that pays him roughly $119 million. Um, and in exchange, the Warriors are taking back Marcus Smart, who's making $21.5 million on an expiring deal, and a 2026 first round pick. And on the screen, I have it being from the Philadelphia trade, where it's the worst of a pair of teams. But it could very likely be that top 20 protected Warriors pick. You could exchange those two. They're kind of interchangeable. I don't really know which asset Golden State would covet the most. But nonetheless, it's a future one from one of those teams plus Marcus Smart. Again, this is a move where I think Marcus Smart fills a need for the Warriors. I think getting some guard depth behind Steph Curry, who's had injury issues the past couple of years with those ankles, and the calf in the playoffs, um, certainly it fills a position of need there for Golden State. The contracts work themselves out. In this deal, Kuminga would have to take about $1 million less the first year and then make it back in the next couple of years just to make the contracts work, so the Wizards don't have to send out future salary. But if you're the Wizards, like you're trading one of the future ones that you got from that Poole trade, but you're basically exchanging, what, a 25-year-old Jordan Poole, who's set to make 30 million this year and next year for Kuminga. If it's a 3-year deal, you're basically paying one extra year of Kuminga for 30 million, and he's that much younger, and I believe has more potential and could be a better fit in this system. That's a deal that I think could make sense. Now, if you're the Warriors in this trade, you probably want more, and this is just kind of a general framework. And if the Warriors, let's say, come back to the Wizards and go, we want a younger player. We like that you're giving us a first, whether it's our own top 20 first protected back in 2030 or it's some other first that you are giving us. And we like Marcus Smart because the salaries work. He's an expiring deal, and it fills a position of need, but we just need a little bit more. I introduce you the little bit more. And that's if the Wizards, you're still getting Kuminga on roughly the same deal. You're still sending out Smart and one of your future firsts from another team, but you're also attaching AJ Johnson. And I know Wizards fans are not going to like this. A lot of Wizards fans view AJ Johnson very, very highly. Um, but again, Marcus Smart isn't a part of this team's future. He's an expiring contract. And again, the Wizards are probably going to trade him at some point anyway, so you shouldn't be too attached. I don't think many Wizards fans would be too upset to see Marcus Smart get traded if it meant bringing Kuminga in. And I understand, AJ Johnson has a lot of potential. He certainly does. Um, but at the end of the day, if you're asking me, would I rather have Jonathan Kuminga on a multi-year deal at 22 years old, or would I rather have AJ Johnson, Marcus Smart, and what will probably be a late first round pick? I'm going to take Jonathan Kuminga every day of the week. And honestly think that the move on your screen might be too weak of a proposal for Golden State. I mean, I don't know how much they like AJ Johnson. I know around the league he's viewed as a decent trade chip. He showed potential. Um, but again, like maybe Golden State also wants a guy like Dylan Jones that the Wizards could package in. But this is another possible deal that sort of fits the criteria of what Golden State is looking for. They're looking for a future one, and the Wizards are sending that to them. In this trade, they're looking for a young player, which AJ Johnson is a young player with potential. And they're looking for obviously contracts to match. And Marcus Smart is an expiring contract to match that also fits a position of need, brings some veteran leadership to an already old veteran team, but certainly has championship pedigree to sort of help Golden State for the next year, at least on that contract. So this is a move that I think checks every box. And if you're sitting here and saying, this just isn't enough, it doesn't move me if I'm the Warriors. Maybe it doesn't, but you have Kuminga here. I don't know what you're looking to do here. I don't know if Kuminga really wants to sign back with Golden State. Um, he wants $30 million per year, and if the Wizards are willing to offer him that in restricted free agency, I don't think the Warriors want to match it. So the best they can do is kind of work with another team on a potential sign and trade. Um, you know, Devin Carter certainly is a better prospect than AJ Johnson. But again, maybe a future one from Sacramento doesn't hold as much weight as the Wizards giving back the Warriors their top 20 protected 2030 pick that they can then use in future trades. So that's certainly, I think, the biggest trade chip for the Wizards is the ability to give that freedom back to the Warriors to trade future picks if they want to upgrade their team and roster at the deadline or throughout the offseason for that matter. AJ Johnson is a solid, promising player that they sort of want in trade negotiations. Smart makes it work, position of need. So this is kind of the framework that the Wizards can at least offer. And whether you think it's enough or not from a Warriors perspective, that's your opinion. All I'm saying here, not that I would accept this if I'm Golden State, is that this is the Wizards' probably best package that checks every box. And so that's kind of the framework with the Marcus Smart trade. And I kind of showed at the beginning, but this would be the framework of a Corey Kispert trade. And I think Corey Kispert, honestly, is a better trade piece just because he's a lot younger than Smart. Didn't have the greatest season last year, um, but again, I think is still a capable shooter in a system like Golden State, where shooters seem to thrive. I think Corey Kispert could do quite well there. Now it would, because Kispert doesn't make as much as Smart. If you're going to also package Corey Kispert with AJ Johnson and one of your future ones to Golden State, Kuminga's contract will look a bit different. He would only be able to make around 24.5 million in the first year. And then obviously you can do an ascending value contract where he's making like 28 in year two, then 30, then 32, something like that. So the Corey Kispert trade makes it a bit wonky just because the salary is a little bit tougher to match, certainly. But I do think that maybe the Warriors covet a player like Kispert that can help them, in the now. And then you obviously have your AJ Johnson or Dylan Jones, two players that I think could be in a package for the Wizards. And I will say, like, while Golden State does want a promising young player, and while maybe Sacramento is comfortable giving up a guy um, like Devin Carter, who they just took in the lottery a year ago, I don't know if the Wizards are willing to do that. They certainly wouldn't give up Bub Carrington. They certainly wouldn't give up Alex Sarr. And I really doubt they'd give up Keyshawn George after the year he had on defense last year. So I don't think any of those guys would be in the equation. They won't give up Bilal Coulibaly. That wouldn't make much sense. Obviously, none of their picks from this previous year are likely to be included. So again, this is kind of where the Wizards are at, and it's clear that there are talks ongoing, and they're a strong contender, as reports indicate. Um, Something that's gained real momentum. So again, I would assume that what they're offering holds some weight to the Warriors, and Golden State isn't necessarily negotiating from a position of power. Let's remember that. What are they going to do? Just say, hey, we're not going to work with you on a sign and trade unless you give us everything we want. Then teams will just back out. This is going to give Golden State maybe some financial flexibility. Instead of paying Kuminga 30, 25, 30 million over the next couple of years, you could just take back expiring salaries in Smart, a cheap rookie deal in Johnson, and then you have flexibility for the foreseeable future. You can make some trades at the deadline with the extra cap you have. If you get your own 2030 pick back, that's also good. So I think the Wizards definitely have some enticing trade chips for Golden State to consider. And I honestly think that if the Warriors are to trade Kuminga, which I think is probably the most likely scenario, the Wizards just got to outbid some of the other teams. And if Sacramento, is only willing to give up Devin Carter and a one, and maybe Golden State is also looking for someone that can help them now, and Sacramento doesn't want to give up a guy like Keon Ellis or Keegan Murray or some of the other players that they have on their roster, then maybe it's possible that the Wizards can swoop in with whatever package they could put together, whether it's with Kispert and Johnson and a future one, whether it's a Smart Johnson and a future one, whether it's just Smart and a future one. I don't really know. But based on Anthony's reporting at The Athletic, the Wizards have some of the pieces to sort of get talks going on a potential Kuminga trade. And that's kind of the reason for this pod. And again, I'll clarify because I'll probably get some comments saying these trades suck. These are just the framework of certain trades. I'm not necessarily in the know as to what Gold State specifically wants. And again, these are just preliminary reports from The Athletic. But should these talks have some serious life, these are a couple of trades that the framework of some trades that I think could possibly uh, put Washington in an advantageous spot to land a guy like Kuminga. And if they get Kuminga, that's a piece that does fit their timeline. A lot of the talk in Washington is about timeline, but it's also about creating that cap flexibility for 2026 and beyond. Now, this would eat into it, probably 25 to 30 million dollars in 26 and probably 27, possibly 28 as well. But again, if the Wizards think Kuminga could be a guy they view as a possible one or two option on a contending team, then maybe they bite the bullet and they make it. It would be a bold move for sure, because he's had his ups and downs at Golden State. But again, he showed he can get it done in the playoffs too. Multiple 20 plus, several actually 20 plus point games in the playoffs. Was really their best player in that Minnesota series in the last three games when Steph went down. So clearly he's able to do it, against the best of the best in the playoffs. So I really don't have too many concerns about Kuminga, the player. I see the vision, I see the potential. A guy that can get to the rim with the best of them, needs to develop a shot, but certainly doesn't strike me as a non Will Dawkins player. Has a lot of upside, still 22. So if the Wizards make a bold move and these reports turn out to be true, then that's certainly you know something to certainly consider. This would be a pretty bold move from Will Dawkins, but again, I think I like it. I think I'd be able to understand it. I respect it, and the Wizards can continue to put together a pretty solid core of wings. They would have a pretty crowded wing census on the team. Um, Kuminga would join Bilal Coulibaly, Keyshawn George, Will Riley, who they just drafted, Jameer Watkins, who they already had. You obviously have, a player like Chris Middleton, who will be in Washington at least for this season. Um, so certainly a pretty crowded wing rotation. But if you can have 22-year-old and Kuminga, and all you're giving up is expiring salary and Smart, the Warriors 2030 top 20 protected pick that would it's going to be from 21 to what 30 if it conveys, and if it doesn't, then I think it turns into a second in 2030 or 2031. So it's really not the greatest asset, but it's also a better asset for the Warriors than the Wizards. So you give that asset up, and you give up AJ Johnson. But you're basically swapping. Who would you rather have, AJ Johnson or Jonathan Kuminga? You'd have Jonathan Kuminga every day of the week. I don't care if he's making 25-30 million dollars. He's the way better player with a lot higher of a ceiling. So again, I don't want to ramble on too much because there's not too much to talk about here. There's not too much reporting, and I'll continue to follow the story as it moves on. But certainly intriguing. And I just saw this. I'll add it real quick. According to the Athletics report, the Warriors balked at the Kings' offer of Devin Carter, Dario Saric, and 2 second-rounders for Jonathan Kuminga. So again, maybe that's because they didn't like the player in Saric fit on their team, and they wanted someone else, like maybe Marcus Smart is more enticing. Maybe they wanted a future one, and Sacramento wasn't willing to give up a future one, and that's why they gave up only twos in that potential trade. But again, the overarching theme of this pod is that if the Warriors, if it's true that the Warriors want salary filler, a young player with promising talent and a future one, the Wizards can check all those boxes. But also at Marcus Smart, if that's the player, giving them a nice rotation piece with championship experience that fills a need for them at the guard position. So. Certainly could see more development in the near future. I think Kuminga will be a fun add to the Wizards. Would be pretty expensive. I think 30 million is way too much for Kuminga, but I would see the vision. I would get it. Not sure if this is the move that the Wizards need to make. I think they're pretty okay if they don't decide to bite on this, but it would be a bold move. And if they like Kuminga that much, I should actually end on this. Like if they make this move um, and they pay him the 30 mil, they clearly do like him enough to be like, hey, we made all these moves to clear our books for the future, but we're going to kind of undo a little bit of it, and we're going to give one of those big contracts to Kuminga. And I will say, for all the people that might hate on trading for Kuminga, and especially at giving him that much money, I'll remind you of the fact that when I tweeted out the Wizards had all that cap space in 2026, which would be 110 million. The main gripe with that was that the Wizards have never been able to attract big name free agents. And so maybe they're kind of sitting here and saying, the only way we might be able to do that and to fill that salary cap is via trade. So why not get a young 22-year-old, potentially budding star, use 30 million of that, 110 million you're projected in cap in 2026, and that way you can get one of those potential stars via trade versus trying to recruit them on the open market, which as we've seen in recent history, it has been pretty difficult for Washington for whatever reason. So that's another reason I would be able to get behind the move. I would actually like the move. So we'll see what happens in the coming days with the development on Kuminga. Certainly follow Anthony V. Slater on Twitter. He's plugged into the Warriors, covers him for The Athletic. He's going to have most of the reporting there. Again, I'm just kind of regurgitating some of his reports, so I don't want to aggravate too much of the story. There's a lot more details in there, so be sure to check out his story. But that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Comment down below what you think of some of the trade packages I offered, if you think the Wizards and Kuminga would be a good fit. But that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks for listening, guys. I'll be back, I believe, Saturday or Sunday. My guy Matt Moderno is joining me for a draft recap and an offseason recap to this point. pod. So be sure to look out for that. But again, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Go Wiz.